Hello, everyone, and welcome to this third panel of the Franco-American Science Fair, Reshaping Science and Health by Collaborating Between Borders and Disciplines, organized by QBI and the Office for Science and Technology of the French Embassy in the US. My name is Héloïse Pajot. I am Deputy Attaché for Science and Technology at the French Embassy in San Francisco, and I will have the pleasure to moderate this panel today. So today we're going to discuss scientific collaboration across borders and how we can work together across disciplines to better tackle current and future challenges in healthcare. To elaborate around this big question, I have the pleasure today to welcome Xavier Bressaud, Attaché for Science and Technology at the French Embassy in Washington, D.C. We also have Jacqueline Fabius, Chief Operating Officer at QBI UCSF, and Anton, CEO of the Campus Paris Santé and full professor at APHP Paris University. So before we start, I want to thank our viewers for joining us live today. Please do not hesitate to use the Q&A section below and ask your questions at any time so that I can get you involved in this conversation. Before we diving deeper, I will let a panelist to introduce themselves and tell us a bit more about their work and what they're doing. So maybe Xavier, you can start.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Héloïse. It's a great pleasure to be with you and participate to this panel. Great pleasure and honor. I'm Xavier Bressaud, working at the French Embassy in the Science Department, and well, I would like to say a word about the science department in itself, and its role is to foster cooperations between France and the US, academic cooperation, technological cooperations, and to do that, we are organized with a service of more than 20 people with representatives in all the US, in particular in San Francisco. Thank you, Héloïse, for instance, and Jean-Baptiste, but also in Chicago, in Los Angeles. Our representatives in Los Angeles are focused on health questions, and we have representatives in Houston, in Boston, and in Atlanta. I'm personally working in Washington, D.C. My focus is on IT, and well, it's quite related to health questions, as we will see. I also want to say that the science department is working with representatives of the French organisms, CNRS, INRAE, also the CNES, the Center for Spatial Studies, and INSERM, well-known health science institution in France. These organisms have representatives based in Washington, D.C. I think I spoke enough, and I'll give more detail later.
Thank you very much. Maybe, Jacqueline, you want to go next?
Yes, good morning and good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be on this panel along with Xavier and Antoine. I am Jacqueline Fabius. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Quantitative Biosciences Institute, QBI. And in my role, along with the director, Nevin Krogan, I oversee the strategy and approach of the institution. And I focus largely on the building of our relationships and collaborations, especially the international ones. Where France is concerned, we have a wonderful relationship with the Institut Pasteur and the Curie Institute, and we're, of course, looking forward to more of these relationships developing. And at QBI, we also focus on highlighting women and representing underrepresented minorities in the sciences. And our primary goal is really establishing collaborations among scientists across disciplines, institutions, countries, with a disease-agnostic approach. And importantly, we also aim to communicate science and its importance to lay audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Antoine? I think you're on mute, Antoine.
Yes, I was saying hi to everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to exchange tonight. I think these are just major topics for science to progress. So my name is Anton. I'm a medicine professor at APHP, which is one of the largest hospital centers in Europe, and also at Université de Paris, which is the largest medical university in France. I've been working a long time in intensive care. I've been also very much involved in digital transformation for both research and education as well. And I've been heading a doctoral program called Center for Interdisciplinary Research, based on the borders between disciplines and the way it helps science to move beyond borders with new ways of creating discovery, also with a very international aspect. I'm currently running the Paris Santé Campus Center, for which you can see a number of pictures at the moment, which is one of the most advanced and most innovative center for digital in healthcare, that is also gathering interdisciplinary players to address big questions on digital aspects of healthcare through research, but also entrepreneurship initiatives. So we'll have a chance to discuss this. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to exchange tonight.
Thank you. And thanks again for joining us today. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about how to collaborate across borders and disciplines in healthcare. And I think it's a very interesting subject, because even if diseases are all different, human cells rely on common mechanisms. So by aggregating the data from different perspectives, maybe we can see patterns, we can see similarities, and we can find out-of-the-box solution and innovate to find new solutions in healthcare. And so therefore, I strongly believe that future challenge in biomedical research can most likely be solved by putting people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, and different countries together. But the question now is how? How can we do that? So maybe we can start the conversation talking about multidisciplinarity in research. Healthcare hasn't always been very multidisciplinary, but nowadays is getting more and more. And a very good example of that is what you did at the QBI Coronavirus Research Group during the pandemic. And maybe, Jacqueline, you can talk a bit more about it. But to give a bit of a context, the QBI Coronavirus Research Group was and is still a consortium of 22 laboratories at UCSF, and also has joined forces from the Gladstone Institute, the Institut Pasteur in France, for example, and many others institutes to work together to find a solution and a treatment for the coronavirus. And it was a big success, because you did in a few months what usually takes years. And so I think this is very impressive, and this is a good example of how collaboration across borders and discipline could be very useful and very powerful. So maybe, Jacqueline, you can start first on this topic and tell us more about your vision and your opinion about multidisciplinarity in science.
Thank you, Héloïse. Yes, I think the QBI Coronavirus Research Group, QCRG, as we call it, was an excellent example of this type of worldwide collaboration that we're looking at or speaking about. You mentioned 22 labs at UCSF. I think it's more than that at this time. And also it's broadened to span world sort of collaborations with labs in Africa, across Europe. And I would say that in the beginning at QBI, when we started, so prior to the QCRG, we built a sort of philosophy of collaboration, if you wish. And this is because we saw that science was happening in different silos, and that each discipline was strongly embedded in its own area. But we believed, obviously, as you do, that bringing people together would generate greater results, as it did in the case of the QCRG. And so we really actively sought out relationships with other institutes and universities, domestically at first, but also internationally very quickly. And we found that people were really very hungry for this kind of interaction. And we really, we set it up first with meetings. We then signed various MOUs or agreements, memorandums of understanding, with different institutions, universities, and places around the world. But importantly, we also set up seed funding to allow people to work together. And for all these relationships, we really also let the science guide the relationships. So it was really bottom up as opposed to top down. And we found that this has created really, really strong ties among people because the interest was really very much there. And one thing that's been very interesting to us is we've been invited a number of times as well to speak about these collaborations that we've created. And what's been very invigorating is that we've found that postdocs and trainees are often the people with the most questions, and they seem to be really interested as to how to create this kind of environment for their future labs and endeavors. And so really, I would say that the future of all this is not just the working together, but the mentoring of young scientists, and for them to think of this medium, science, as a collaborative one and not an individual one, and not so much about who gets there first with the research, but how do we get to the solution. So I think I'm talking more about the kind of philosophy that one creates to build these collaborations.
Yeah, thank you. And maybe Antoine, are you planning to work around this philosophy too with the Paris Campus Santé? Do you have plans to foster and strengthen multidisciplinarity collaborations?
Yes, absolutely. So as I said, I've been very much involved in promoting this kind of not only doing research but thinking, and very interestingly, and I'm sure Jacqueline has the same findings, it's also bringing to the students and researchers a new way to think outside the box, because understanding reasoning from other disciplines is crucial if you want to be able to mix people and views and create new ways to foster medical fields or research fields, etc. So definitely, yes, Paris Santé Campus will be one of the largest place to display interdisciplinary approaches. And very simply, if you look at digital healthcare, you understand that you have to actually gather expertise from different disciplines and different skills, not only for caregivers, but also for researchers, for entrepreneurs. We also have philosophers, we have economists, we have social scientists, we have biologists, we have geneticists. So every aspect that is actually transformed by digital tools that get together and think together the way we want to have what we do in healthcare evolve through digital transformation. So it can be very deep tech levels, but it can be also very applied aspects for citizens, for example, the way you access healthcare through digital apps, the way you actually interact with a caregiver through telemedical consultation, etc., etc. So it's very large aspect of digital transformation that we will address with very different views from interdisciplinary teams.
Thanks. And in another level, we're also working on that with the French embassy, and maybe Xavier, you can elaborate around that. We have, I think, programs and grants to foster collaboration between France and America. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. We have programs at the embassy to foster cooperation between France and the US, and we are quite interested in trying to develop interdisciplinary to seed we have programs to start cooperation, for new cooperation, like for instance the Thomas Jefferson Fund, and one of the idea is to prefer interdisciplinary project to other ones that may help try to see in both countries how interdisciplinarity is tackled. Interdisciplinarity is also something that you have to start with young. When you study, I mean, it's putting people with different background together, okay, but it's often a question of language, and you have to learn the language of the other disciplines, and this must start quite early in the information, and these things are changing step by step in both countries, and we have to learn from each other how it's changing and how it is in the other country. We have a program for young researchers at the end of the studies, and they can also be used in this way. The so-called Chateaubriand grants help students go from who are doing a PhD in the US. They can spend a few months in a lab in France, and we would prefer them to go to a lab that is not doing exactly the same thing as what they are doing in the US. That's also a way to foster interdisciplinarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so first, foster international collaboration and collaboration across discipline is a very beautiful project, and I really believe in it, but it's facing a lot of limits and a lot of problems, challenges, and one of them is the reward system right now in science, because right now the reward system in science is more like an individualistic system where the work of one person is rewarded rather than the work of a group. And Jacqueline, you mentioned it earlier. And this is a big limit of the creation of collaboration between departments and countries. So what is your opinion about it, and how do you think it's going to evolve in the coming years? Jacqueline, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think, again, bring the example of the QCRG, the QBI coronavirus group. We had initially a few hundred scientists working together. And, because the pandemic has been something that's touched so many people's lives, obviously, there was a philanthropic response that was quite significant. And so even though, so we were able to raise philanthropic funds, and even though the fundraising was spearheaded by Nevin Krogan, who instigated the group, it was normal to distribute the funds to multiple labs, obviously, since it was such a large group. And I would say that currently at NIH, the National Institute of Health in the United States, where academia gets most of its funding really for research, we're seeing more and more opportunities for center grants, that is, calls for large groups to work together towards a specific question. So, and for example, currently at QBI, we submitted a grant with 45 labs for a call that's just gone out, and it's international labs. It's about half and half, in UCSF labs and international labs coming together for COVID research. And so I think we're hopefully seeing more and more of these mechanisms rewarding large collaborative groups as opposed to individuals. However, I would say that the success of this, again, I think depends on what I mentioned before, which is the mentoring of the future generations of scientists to think with a more global perspective to address human problems. And I think that if people demand change, it will happen. So again, bottom up, if scientists themselves are demanding that the reward systems change, I think they will.
Yes, exactly. Xavier, do you want to go next and elaborate around that?
One of my ideas about this question of mechanism is related to data and sharing data. It seems to me that the scientific system is organized around writing papers, and when you collect data, you work with the data, you make them clean. It's quite difficult task, and this task is not very well rewarded. So you have to write a paper with your data to get something of it, and you don't want to share them at least too quickly. And I imagine we could change this, but step by step, by rewarding the fact that you have produced data, you have made them clean and usable by other people. It's not completely clear. We had a lot of discussion about this topic, and it's not easy, and it should be maybe a bottom-up process as well. as Jacqueline said, it's not so easy to impose this from the top, but that's a direction I think we should foster. And this, I think this would help also interdisciplinarity, because people from other disciplines would also use the data you have produced if they are put in a good form and made public.
Yes, definitely. Antoine, do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's crucial topics if you want to have different players involved to understand how they can get value from the collaboration. So that's a crucial point, as well as the one in commentary, understand how they can speak to each other. One thing I think that summarizes well the value of it is the phrase that says that none of us is as smart as all of us. And basically adding, people, adding ways of thinking always create value. And then you have to not only acknowledge this, but also create systems where you can value this and where everyone can get rewards from getting together. Definitely with the open data strategies, with the change in the way researchers can have rewards from the research. You can see that the classical publication scheme is changing. The way people use reputation or opening research data, opening databases, etc., creates actually more traffic and more vision and more exchanges. So that's really one very interesting thing. I think it won't. I mean, it's not automatic, so we have to push forward towards this new ways of getting rewards and have everyone understand that we can move to more open models so that everyone can get benefit from getting together in an interdisciplinary fashion. And also having people understand what they can gain, not only in terms of reward, but in terms of research horizons, I would say, is really interesting. So most of people are trained with specific frames, at least in terms of thinking. And so moving to interdisciplinary research and interdisciplinary ways of thinking needs a moment to break these frames. If you can't understand how people, the way people think when they're coming from other disciplines, then you cannot get the value actually that you're looking for through interdisciplinary research. So getting people to understand this through education to interdisciplinary research is absolutely crucial. When you get the right examples and the right programs, people understand very fast the power they can get from different ways of thinking in their own field of research. And that's absolutely fascinating when we talk to students. In France, most of the kids in school, they have a very strong education with frames. And basically, for me, one of the best aspects in this is when kids learn how to draw and use color pencils. They usually have shapes, and the teachers teach them how to put colors inside the shapes. And when they cross the borders of the shape, then they get a wrong mark, which actually is a good example of how you can move different ways of thinking in research. You cross the shapes and you cross the borders, but for this you need to get rewards.
Yeah, I agree. We have a very interesting question from the audience. And it's from Anthony. It's given how specialized research has become, how have your approach overcoming areas, expertise, language difference, and subject matter bias orientation amongst various members to foster collaborations? Who wants to take this question? Yeah.
I can take a stab at this. I think, we've gone around many places in the world. And so my background is not in science. And initially when I entered this world, I thought everybody just spoke the same language. So in my view, I thought someone talking about proteomics could go talk to someone about plants and everybody just understood the same thing. But it's been fascinating to me to see that there are actually sub-languages within the language. That's one thing. But interestingly, no matter where we go, people are speaking in English. And it doesn't matter whether we've gone to China or to France or to Germany, the language of science is English. So there's this commonality in being able to express, people expressing themselves even in very, very technical terms. But moreover, what I've seen among scientists is this really intense desire to communicate that I've not seen in other aspects of the world thus far. That there is really no barrier of culture, ethnicity, or anything like that, which is really fascinating to me in science. And so I think there isn't a prejudice that I've seen, which is a huge statement to make among scientists when they meet each other. The basis of judgment is really on the science and not the people. And I'm not sure if that's answered Anthony's question.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Antoine or Xavier, do you want to add something?
Just one word time. I mean, you need to work together with other people to learn their language, even if the basis is common. And I totally agree with what Jacqueline said. And we have a positive basis. You need time, and you need to work together to really understand what is the language of the other. Practice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as I said, sometimes it's breaking your own barriers to overcome mental fences that we tend to have and open understanding of other ways of thinking. So in Paris, we have a few programs like this, and it's actually something that we do on a very active basis. So you have some of the students that we recruit, they have like 24 or 48 hours training specifically on interdisciplinary research and the way they can promote, opening to other disciplines and understand the value of it through examples. I think there's a very nice book that summarizes some of these findings. It's called Reinventing Discovery by Nielsen. It has like 20 or 30 years. But it shows in very good example not only the powers of interdisciplinary views, but also the way you can achieve interdisciplinary thinking in the students and researchers.
Thank you. We will have a look to this book. We have another question from our panelist. It's gonna appear soon. So this is a question from Prosper. How do you think that scientists and researchers can be promoted and rewarded for their collaboration, as the current administrative procedure discourages the process for young scientists? Any thought about it?
So maybe I can start and answer this question. As we discussed already, I think this is a crucial way to promote this kind of method to do research. And if we don't think of it, then we will not go to the optimal side of this interdisciplinary approach. What we try to understand is the value of rewards in the classical publication system, and try and promote new ways of rewarding scientists, and trying to show that if you have very strong and very interesting results through open publication, then you can get more value than classical impact factor publications. And it not only goes to that extent, but you can actually go further, showing how new digital tool on reputation can actually help you gain more collaborations and more visibility in the scientific world. So we're trying to build up systems where the impact factor is not the only way, as classical systems do, to promote value for researchers. But for example, if you take some of the bibliometric index, some of them actually try and evaluate the impact or the visibility of researchers. So promoting, for example, social media publication or Wikipedia views and stuff like that is another way of trying to assess the real visibility and reputation of researchers.
Yeah, I think that, to echo a little bit of what Antoine is saying, I think at QBI we've really developed our media presence. And I think as best as we can, we've tried to promote trainees and young scientists. And I think when you have somebody that stands out because of, maybe collaborative research they're doing or something, we have all these tools available to us now where we can really promote people, whether it's through an interview or Twitter or, small Instagram highlight. And the more exposure you give them, obviously, the more the outside world knows about them and reaches out to them as well. And I think this does, at the end, have an impact on funding agencies who are watching these things and who are, paying attention to someone they may not have seen because maybe their lab is so small or so young that they haven't even published yet, right? But they're part of something important. So I think using media is a great way to bring exposure to young scientists that the administration, let's say, as Prosper mentions, is not pushing forward.
Well, another way to fight is to try to make the administrative process easier, and that's one of our fight at the embassy, trying at least when it's in question of cross-border cooperation, make things easier to the researcher, and that's one of our roles.
Yes, exactly. I want now to go back to a point you said, Xavier. It's about data sharing. And yeah, sharing data in science is very complicated when you're working with different countries and across borders. Because, for example, if you're working with the Europe, you have to be compliant to comply with GDPR. So how do you do to strike collaboration when you can't share your data? Is there a solution for you? Is this a very big problem, or did you find solution to go around that? What do you think? Who wants to start?
I can say a word, and we will see if it corresponds to the reality. Because what I observed, I'm quite interested in this question. I've been interested for quite some time, and what appears is that I have very different response coming from different institutions or people. And some people say it's not a problem. I can exchange the data easily, and the rules are quite easy to comply. And some say it made my cooperation with France or with the US impossible. And the first point is that information about this process should be spread better, because those who can share and find ways to share should explain to the other ones how they do. And so I'm very interested. We have two different institutions represented, and they will tell us what difficulties they meet and what solution they find.
I think that when discussing data sharing, there's also an aspect of trust, which brings in all kinds of international relation issues, which I guess Xavier alludes to. There's a very recent example, like, last week, South Africa shared data with the rest of the world. And there were repercussions, unfortunately, which are being discussed in media, such as, should countries now lock down and not allow certain flights to happen as a result of this data sharing. So there's a huge aspect of trust. I think whether you keep your data, whether you share it, even if it's to the benefit of humankind. So these are very muddy waters, which I don't think we're going to solve in the next 30 minutes. But it's a lot about, I think, everything we're talking about, the collaborating across borders and getting to a whole other level of trust and systems of trust, if only in science, because certainly politically we won't. I'm a bit of a cynic, I guess, but I mean, world history shows that we will not all get along at the same time, but perhaps we could in science. And there's perhaps some level of capacity building that has to happen in this way across different nations so that everybody sort of gets to a more equal level about not only the kind of data that can be generated and be trusted and shared, but also for people to understand that their data won't be abused, like they won't be left behind once they've shared their data or be punished for sharing the data. I know I'm saying things very broadly and very openly, but I think this is something that's very important in data sharing across the world.
Yeah, so I agree with Jacqueline. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we have all the answers at the end of this discussion, but at least we can shape a few important aspects and facts. One is, I mean, why is this question so important? Because data has a lot of value in research, of course, in healthcare as well. And you see the some of the economical models of care systems that actually are transforming with the data getting more and more value. So understanding that data has a value brings you to how you can actually share this, and not only share the data, but also share the value and share the revenue from the data. And so that's one first thing to address. And when you go further, it's also very interesting with the cross-border view to understand the way both US and France work with health or research data. And they actually have different aspects, not only in public policy, but also in revenues from the data. There's actually a very nice French analysis of this. There's a French research group called the IFRI, it's an International Institute for Research, that actually addresses through the view of the pandemic that we recently went through, the way different countries behave with their healthcare data. And you see that there are really different models and different views, and understanding this is a very important aspect if you want to go deeper into how we can share and share revenue from data. So that's one very important thing. The other thing is that we as a community need to create a tipping point where sharing data not only is an exception, but becomes really part of our daily work. And also understanding, and that's a real important fact, that when you share data in your own discipline, there are lots of aspects that you cannot address in other disciplines where the data that you share actually get value. And I think one of the important examples in this is understanding, for example, everyone is concerned with the security of healthcare data, how you protect them, how you anonymize them, how people actually steal them, etc. But no one understands that sometimes, classical real-life data has more information on your health than your actual health data. For example, transportation or data from internet search or social media patterns or expressions, etc. These data, people don't look at them as they should be protected like healthcare data, but they can actually have sometimes more insights on what you are looking at if you're pregnant, for example, and it gives you a lot of or people a lot of information on your health and stuff like that. So understanding that large data sets has more value than what you are looking at with your own perspective as a researcher is really a crucial example to understand how these data can actually provide value for the whole scientific community.
Yes. So maybe we can work around that and work about the policies, the regulation, but also, as you said, like Jacqueline's trying to do something from down to top and trying to move things at her level. I have a very interesting question from a panelist. So it's Jackie. Jackie saying, thanks for sharing your experiences. How have you managed to overcome issues of intellectual property and encouraging trust in such big groups such as the QCRG, Jacqueline?
Well, first of all, I think that when, we are living in a special time, first of all. But I think at the onset of the pandemic, there was a very unified response across the board, across the world. And I think, and I can only speak for UCSF, but certainly at UCSF, everybody came to the table really ready to work. There weren't these concerns immediately about IP, for example. And we were also right away getting calls from different companies, large pharmaceutical companies, really just asking, how can we help? Not, how do we protect our information? How do we gain from it? But how can we help? What can we do? And so there was really, this was really the very beginning of all of this. And I think one way to manage intellectual property, let's say, is to make sure that everybody feels they have a seat at the table and what's being shared. And one way to do this was these massive publications. So the papers that have come out of the QCRG, some have over 50 authors. One of our papers has 200 authors, right? And this is not common, I think, in science publication. But what you had is everybody gets credit, right? And I think people become less protective when they feel they're part of something that is larger, that they're included in and heard, right? Because everybody gets the credit.
Xavier, Antoine, any thought about it? Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I fully agree. And as it's been said earlier, we need to find new ways of sharing rewards and reputation and even financial aspects of discovery. So that's part of it.
Xavier, you're on mute.
No, I agree, and well, this question of trust is crucial, and but it really depends on the institution, and each one has to find his solution. But what is important is to have it in mind and to encourage the building something collective and rewarding at the right level. But that, of course, that's not easy, and that's an experience in each new organization. I mean, the problem is not new in some sense. Everything is going faster and faster, but any human enterprise has the same problem, same difficulty.
So maybe now we can move to another topic. We are all French people here in this panel, and we are all working with the US or in the US. So I'm really interested to know what's the difference between French scientists and American scientists, because I think that we tend to say that in France we are more maybe rigorous, while in the US you are more able to take risk and be innovative in science. And I want to have your point of view on this question. So what is the difference between a French scientist and an American scientist, and what is the complementarity between those two profiles?
If I can say, well, I would not say rigorous. I would say we are maybe have a tendency to be more abstract, while yes, people try to give an answer to the question. When we are asked a question, we try to build a theory before to try to answer to the question. But I see it as very positive here to really tackle the question. While I like to build pseudo theories, so that's fascinating to see how people work here. But I don't have an experience as a researcher in health. It's more difficult for me to have an insight on this aspect.
Quick fix, I'm Francophone, but representing Haiti. Just wanted to say that. So I think, there are differences. I think the French are more measured and spend more time debating pros and cons. Whereas, as you said, Americans are more known for jumping in and taking risks. The differences are largely cultural. However, I think, the French are also best known for the French Revolution and turning systems upside down to reinvent them. So this is one of my favorite paintings by Delacroix, which I think really embodies the French spirit of change, right? I think there's also an inherent sense of solidarity in France, and going back to the science, going back to the sense of trust. I think once the trust has been established, the French are very ready to jump in with trusted collaborators to see how they can revolutionize and advance science. So I think there are cultural differences, but I think these things with trust, which is maybe perhaps the sort of running theme in our conversation today, with trust, I think people work together and collaborate, and it doesn't matter whether your approach is more careful or more risky. There is a happy medium when the trust is there.
Yeah, I usually I'm quite precocious with ideas on standardizing people. What I see definitely is the value of getting together if we have differences, in line with what we just said. And so this is also why we're very much interested at Paris Santé Campus in international collaboration. Again, getting different views in different systems. And in line also with the question of data sharing. For example, if you run AI algorithm, having different data sets to train your machine learning or deep learning initiatives, for example, is really important to make sure that they actually apply to a global population and they're not biased from one specific population, etc.
Try. I heard that it could be well, it's not specific to American and French, but there are difficulties when you want to share data. Not only you have to standardize your data, but you have habits and cultural habits that make you the same data, even with some standardization, does not have the same value because of cultural difference and different habits. And well, it's as stupid as taking the temperature in the morning or in the evening, but it can be much deeper for more complicated processes where you want to have data, and that's one reason more to learn to know each other and to exchange the value. Antoine is stressing. Maybe if we are thinking about differences between the countries, between the people, it does not really make sense. But the organizations are quite different as well. In the health, in particular, the French system is integration of hospitals, research, and university is quite the same in all the French structure. In most of the French structures. It seems to me that the system in the US is more well. You have many different models, and some of them look like the French ones, but some are completely different. And it's not, well, at least for us, it's not so easy to understand. I don't know how positive. What is the value to have the same integrated system, and what is the value to have different models, and does it give more solutions? I don't have a definitive idea, but it's interesting also to notice that.
I mean, I would imagine that having a similar system across the board makes it easier, as you mentioned, to pull out information and to gather things more quickly. I suppose perhaps one advantage of having such differences is that you really get different perspectives. Maybe it's not as coherent initially, but then perhaps you have a choice as an outsider as to which one you're addressing, right, in certain ways.
And well, that's maybe also a different difference. But we've been talking about sharing data cross border, and well, if you think about personal data, the relationship of the people with their data is quite different, and well, not so easy to define. It's well. One of the consequences has been the GDPR in Europe and the absence of GDPR, but well, more flexible rules, let's say, in the US. And well, I'm just thinking that the way we think about the data and the people is probably not exactly the same on the two sides, and that well, of course, for individuals it does not make sense, but it made rules are different, and that's one of the difficulty we have. But this difficulty maybe we can overcome by working at top level. I mean, by changing the rules or finding ways to help people comply the rules on both sides when sharing personal data. And maybe we should go further in this direction.
We had a panel last year in the first annual science fair, and there was a panel focused on that very topic, and with people really talking about how do you sort of normalize and balance the data so that you can share it across borders, because as you're saying, it's maybe not radically different, but it's different from each source, right? And that's one of the issues. But then that also falls into regulation, this, that, and the other. But that is a very interesting subject to pursue.
I imagine Paris Santé Campus will have insight on this aspect, benefiting of the uniform organization in France. You will propose solutions.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's really interesting how international collaboration can help find new solutions to national programs. For example, getting data that we cannot have access to in France with collaboration, or providing access to data or findings that some other countries like the US cannot have access to for different reasons. Brings value to a group of researchers getting together, and sometimes it's having specific data sets already available. Sometimes it's the ability to fund specific research cross borders with the national funding, etc. And so this is also what I like very much, is finding diversity and complementarity in international collaborations.
Yes, definitely. So thank you very much. We are warping out of time. I don't know if you want to add something else before we wrap it up.
It's been a fantastic pleasure being on this panel. I've enjoyed this discussion, and I'm sure we share the same view that we're all promoting sort of intercultural, international collaborations, and that is definitely the way of the future. It's perhaps the way of the past as well, but maybe we can take a bigger role in making it the reality.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your vision and your experience. Xavier, do you want to say something?
No, I want to say that Jacqueline had said exactly what we needed to say, so that's perfect.
Wonderful.
Absolutely, and thank you again for allowing us to participate and exchange in this panel. I think one of the important things is that if we all think that we need to have these sometimes classical models of collaboration, data sharing, researchers reward evolve. This is also our task, to promote new models and to make sure that they are actually matching their goals and promoting through international collaboration these new models.
Yes, exactly. So we're gonna work around that.
Unless we can play a role in this process.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and see you tomorrow for the next panel. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.